So, I suggested that we talk about the current state of the world today in the energy of anger and rage.
Yeah.
And I want to start by saying that anger and rage are not bad feelings. There is no such thing as a bad feeling.
Right.
But like all feelings, we can get stuck in them. And like all feelings, we can use the feelings to propel us forward, to get information, to figure out what our next step needs to be. So I wanted to talk about that difference, that fine-tuned difference between getting stuck or channeling the energy of an emotion in order to take action or allow yourself to be in a certain state. So yeah, how has it been for you lately, kind of witnessing the current sort of emotional state of the world? Because I know you and I have very different perspectives on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I want to... I mean, I was talking to my therapist the other day about this, of like, I feel it's kind of compounding the concept of me feeling selfish when I know that I don't have the spoons to really provide the amount of activism that I, like, in my head really want to provide for these sort of things. Because I know that if I stepped into a space of activism in my really burnt out state, I could do the thing where I would be, like, not able to hone in and be aware of where my emotions are coming from and potentially cause harm in my activism versus if I'm more self-regulated or more healthy, then I can step into it with a place of, you know, being the best I can be in those spaces. So I was processing with my therapist about what I can do in this state of being burnt out, but still wanting to help. And we talked about how there are people out there who are providing links and different places that you can support, or offering ways that you can support outside of monetary stuff. If you can't support, with monetary stuff, there's people out there that are content creators who want their voices to be heard more, so you can support them by reposting their stuff and interacting with their things more, if social media is a thing that you do a lot. So it's like I've been becoming more aware of that. And I've also been working on educating myself more, but I've also seen the social media posts from BIPOC creators being like, good job, white people, on educating yourself, but that's not enough.
Right.
And so I don't want to be like, that's all I'm doing. But I want to continue. I don't want to stop doing that, of course. But BIPOC creators have a very, it's valid to the 1000th degree of, this stuff has been happening to BIPOC people since before America was colonized.
Right.
And so it's like, due to the Roe v. Wade thing, or targeting the concept of white women and white uterus owners, basically funneling the concept of white people having more children, because a lot of BIPOC people have experienced non-consensual sterilization.
Right.
So it's like this really complex, horrendous thing that's happening in our country, and it's like so big, such a huge thing, that it's like, where do we even start?
And so this is where this is very complex, of course, but all of the anger without the ability to take action. So if we just if we focus in on everything that hurts to the point where we get so overwhelmed by it that we're stuck in it, we can't take action anyway. So in those times, the most compassionate choice is to take a step completely away from it, to admit that we can't look at it right now because we don't have the resources, and to not drain ourselves more in the process, right? We can demonstrate what it looks like to take care of us. And every single person's story of what taking care of themselves is going to look very different, but we don't encourage people to take care of themselves, and we take away their right to take care of themselves. And so it makes sense why people would want to be angry and why they would be angry. But what next? It's either we lean in and we focus on it in order to take action that is going to make a difference, or we need to back away.
I mean, I think that's the thing that's the most frustrating, is that that's the white person's pattern. Like, we'll have some sort of egregious thing come into the news being like, this terrible thing happened involving, a person of color, and this is the movement, and how are we going to move forward in this movement? And so the outrage will happen for a little bit, but then since it's not really affecting us as white people, it's like we have the privilege to take a step back because it's not completely affecting, the community, the white community necessarily. I mean, it is in a more complex way, but like directly, the privilege for white people is to be able to take a step back and be like, I don't have to necessarily fight for this because it's not a constant thing that's happening around me. Like, people who are living in communities where a person, a child, a family member, a cousin is assaulted or murdered by police, or targeted by different rules, or any sort of bullshit societal stuff and biases that have caused them to be in the crossfire, makes it be on the forefront of their minds. Like, they can't, like, that's our privilege. We don't see it all the time. Like, we're not in that space, but they do. And so they have to constantly be hypervigilant of this stuff and be pushing out these resources and providing this sort of care. So it's like, yes, I'm overwhelmed over some of the stuff that is existing in the forefront of my mind in terms of like neurodivergence, mental health stuff. But at the same time, it's like, as a white person, I don't have a bunch of other oppression stuff on the constant forefront of my mind. Right. I completely agree with everything you've just said. I want to clarify a point in case it was coming across like I was saying everybody should just step back from their anger and like deal with it. Because I'm not trying to imply that like stepping back forever is the right choice. Mm-hmm. But everyone, if you are in such a state of anger that all you can do is hurt more people, right, you are not helping. True. Now, I get, and this is the problem, this is why this whole thing is a massive issue, is BIPOC people, for example, have been so harmed over and over and over and over and over again that they are constantly in the fight, flight, freeze, pretty much, especially if they're around law enforcement, for example. Mm-hmm. Court issues, anything having to do with law, because they've faced that, right? If they're in that state of anger, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense for
white people to stay in a level of hypervigilance, fight, flight, freeze around racial issues. But if they're burnt out from all the other stuff that they're dealing with, and then they're trying to step in and be an activist on behalf of a population that they don't even understand the experience of, and they're already coming from a burnt out place, they're gonna fuck it up.
Yep.
So you can't just step out of fight, flight, freeze.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wouldn't that just be lovely, though?
Right. So I am not implying that BIPOC people, that African Americans, that, you know, people on reservations, indigenous people whose land have been taken away, who have been routinely abused, etc., should just step back from the anger of their abuse. That's not what I was trying to say at all.
I know. My neurodivergent brain was taking all of the new, like, there's so much nuance with this.
Right.
And so it's like, my brain makes sure that this is the thing with having to deal with neurodivergence is the feeling that you need to explain all of the sides, because there are so many times that you will have a statement and someone will step in and be like, however, like, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Or this was just a callous thing to say because you didn't understand the whole picture. So I try my best to go about it in explaining the whole picture, but I understand that you were not coming from it in a space of everyone needs to take a step back 100% of the time because we don't have the spoon for it at all, and we just can't be activists, or, you know. So it's like I totally get that that's not where you were coming from. I was just kind of like, that was something that I've been thinking about over the past several weeks over this
right
stuff too.
And I think that all people, and this includes BIPOC people or people that have experienced, you know, a specific trauma, everyone deserves the right to say, I don't want to deal with this awful part of my life right now, and I'm going to tune out for a little bit. Mm-hmm. Obviously that doesn't mean that the issue stops happening around us.
I mean, yeah, like you've offered sanctuary for people, like friends and family in your life, to, like, we've set up our guest room at times and been like, hey, you want to come over to our house and just have, like, a little retreat to yourself and get out of the environment that you're in that's causing you so much distress. Like, we've done that before. Mm-hmm. And, like, we didn't really have to do too much other than, like, cleaning a little bit of our house, but, like, for the most part we didn't have to do much except offer the invitation. Right. But it wasn't a, hello, please come to our house and stay here for the rest of your life. Because that isn't helping them right at all. Like, it's helping them kind of take a step back and breathe a little bit more so they can go into the environment and with a more clear head. But it's not exactly like a perfect analogy, but it's just like an analogy of showing, like, we can step back and try to work on self-healing so that we can be more, like, in a better space to approach these issues.
Right. We need to help ourselves before we can help other people. And when we're stuck in an energy of nonstop anger, mm-hmm. that burns us out, because full-blown anger is part of, like, that fight, flight, freeze response. And, you know, staying there chronically can cause crash, can cause depression. So it's not that I'm saying don't be angry. I'm saying make sure that you are tuning into your anger and meeting it with what it needs. Does it need to be expressed? And so you write, or you paint, or you call a friend, or you talk in therapy? Does it need to be turned into action, and you want to protest, or you want to, you know, demonstrate, or take action to write letters, or start a campaign or a fundraiser? Like, there's so many things to do with the anger. Even just moving, right? Doing movement with the body. Go kickbox. Go, like, run. Literally run. And get that energy charge out of your system, because if you stay all the way elevated in it, you are going to be disempowered. And, like, there's this huge, and I'm about to go on a woo tangent a little bit, so
please do.
Warning. But I truly believe, and I know that there are others that believe like me, that we are being tested as a collective right now. No matter what interpretation that you want to read into this. Is it, Revelations is coming and Christ is about to return and beam us up into the sky or something? Is this starseed portal stuff? Is this literally just history repeating itself every 80 years and we are right on the cusp of like another big war? However you look at it, if you do really take a step back, we are being tested collectively as to how we handle our anger and how we are handling our heavier emotions. And we can unite and we can work together, or we can stay in this illusion that we're disempowered, that our voice doesn't mean anything, that we cannot take action, that there's nothing we can do. These are the very words I hear from people. Oh, there's nothing I can do. Oh, I've been disempowered. My choice has been taken away. And then they just stay in that. And there's no ability to move from a place like that when you're in absolutes. So remembering that we do have power and stepping back into our power with our anger to say, I have power, I have control over what I do, and I am going to speak, or I am going to protest, or I am going to take a break from it. Whatever that looks like, to be empowered in your choice rather than leaning into, there's nothing I can do, I'm just so mad, I don't know what to do. It's okay to not know what to do, but you gotta be able to kind of come down and ask for help then, which is very hard to do if you're wound up in that like absolutely terrifying state of anger all the time. Yeah. And I mean, holding the anger can first kind of come across as I've held anger, when the Roe v. Wade thing first happened. I remember having this shot of, it's the fight response. So it's like you have this shooting adrenaline in your system of like, how the fuck dare they? Right.
And then I was scrolling through TikTok and hearing about how it's going to, how Roe v. Wade is just kind of like the last straw because bullshit has already been happening to other minorities regarding reproductive rights and rights in general. So I was fueled by that. And sometimes people will take that and be like, this angry state is intoxicating. Like, they're like, I want to stay in here because this is giving me energy and motivation to just run forward finally, sort of thing, versus people who I kind of oscillate between the two of fight or freeze. And freeze basically is just like dissociative, hopeless, talking in absolutes in terms of being disempowered. And that is hard because it's, one, exhausting to be in the fight response all the time. Also exhausting to be in the freeze response all the time. And exhausting to be oscillating between the two.
Right.
And so the first step is to gather awareness as to what you are doing. So, like, my awareness is that I oscillate between the two. Other people will be like, I'm in this fight response all the time right now. The thing about being in a fight response can be coming from, well, it often comes from fear.
Yeah.
And so and the thing is, when we're dealing with fear, sometimes that adrenaline can say to us, you need to be in this state at all times. And that can just burn you out more. And so you need to start creating a safety plan for yourself, like an emotional and physical safety plan. So if you are recognizing, like, what are your safe spaces? Who are the people that you trust? Where can you be where you know you're not going to be, harmed in any way? Do you need to bulk up the security in your house? Like, that's a thing that Saffrian and I have been working on, is we got Ring doorbells and
after an attempted break-in.
Yeah, so
it happens.
It happens, and it's scary, and so it's like, figure out what you need to feel more secure, and then the more you start building up those things, and some people do more like shielding work in terms of their mental and emotional, spiritual stuff by creating personal shields or shielding their community or shielding people that they care about. And then there are just so many different steps that you can take that can ultimately allow you to get into that space of being more regulated, because you don't have to be in the fight, flight, freeze response 100% of the time anymore.
Right. And when you expand your window of tolerance to, you come back down into your window of tolerance, you're often able to hold space for your anger in a different way. Like, you can choose to do something with the anger at that point instead of being consumed by and driven by that anger in that, primal instinct fight, flight, freeze response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like sometimes we talk to clients about the fact that you can kind of be a witness to the anger instead of being hijacked by the anger. So when you are bearing witness to your anger, it's a different feeling. And it's kind of a similar situation where, at least I've experienced it this way, where someone is explaining hurt to me. Like they've been hurt by something and they're venting to me about it, like a client. And I can hold space and witness that hurt. However, if I recognize the hurt, like if Safriana mentions hurt, since I'm so close to her, I'll be like, become hijacked with, how could I have done better? Where did I mess up in this? What could I, and so those different things cause me to get hijacked and not bear witness to her pain. We're getting better at it, of course, but it's like that was what we recognized was happening. And so that's what happens with us, with ourselves, which is really meta when you think about it, where you will take an emotion and you can, when you're more regulated, you can bear witness to it and listen to what its needs are, versus if you aren't in a regulated space, you can be completely hijacked by it. And that's what I recognize too, is like, even though I have the awareness of bearing witness to Safriana's emotions and being there for her, when I have a lower window of tolerance, it is much harder to do that. So being able to recognize like where we are in our window of tolerance is also a way for us to recognize like, oh, I need to start doing self-care, start doing coping mechanisms,
right,
sort of thing.
And I know we haven't really talked about this in the podcast yet at this point, but if you are someone who wants to learn more about the window of tolerance and you want more tangible coping skills and such, we do have a program available that is a course that is filled with all kinds of gems about that, and it's something that we're going to be adding to, and it's the Rise Mental Health Toolkit, which can be found on the courses page at livinglunas.com. But, we need to learn how to expand our window of tolerance. All of us, 100% of us. Like, this does not fall on just one race. It doesn't fall on just one gender. Like, 100% of people need to try and work on their window of tolerance and expand their capacity to deal with life. Right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the huge thing about privilege, is that there can be people who have zero window of tolerance and can get away with the fact that they're being hijacked by emotions.
Yeah, I mean, all you got to do is look at, certain politicians that have committed, atrocities and literally been witnessed having temper tantrums, and people are just like, oh, that's okay. It's a white guy.
Yeah, and I mean, there's enough examples of black men and black boys being targeted by police because police claim to have seen them reaching for something suspicious, when cop cams, like, their best cameras show that was not at all what was happening.
Right.
Versus people who have been persons of interests and suspects to mass shootings being, talked down and brought into the police station, like,
right. And
without any of that.
Yeah, and that's a trauma response. Like, police freaking out about Black people is 100% based on the fact that they're not owning their shit and working on their internalized racism that is caused by a legacy of fear of, you know, the white man being overthrown.
Yeah, and that's, you know, and them not taking responsibility for working on their internal biases and their window of tolerance, because basically what's happening is they're letting themselves be hijacked by that fear.
Yep.
And that's causing terrible things to happen. But like, we're getting tiny bits of like fleeting moments of police officers being discharged and jailed for this sort of stuff, but that doesn't make up for the fact that they've taken lives.
Right.
Like, there's too many families that have been affected by people, by police officers, like, taking lives from their families.
Yeah. And that is, like, all of this stems back to trauma. Like, we are a traumatized culture.
Yeah.
We are a traumatized people. Mm-hmm. And we aren't doing a whole hell of a lot to improve that.
Yeah.
And that's why I am so passionate about, you know, sharing the messages that I am about elevating each other and lifting each other up, because all of this division and, you know, of course, anger is, this feels like it needs to go at the very beginning of the episode too. Anger is a normal response that says my boundaries have been violated. Now, obviously there's blackout rages that happen from people that are extremely hijacked, coming from a traumatized place. That is often the type of anger wielded by people who engage in abuse, who are narcissistic, who, you know, do some really awful shit, and they use their anger as an excuse, so there's no ownership of the anger. But healthy, owned anger is usually indicative of a boundary being violated. So every single person that is currently angry about the Roe v. Wade decision is angry because their boundaries of being able to have autonomy over their own body, which is, I believe, to be a right,
Yep.
is being taken away. And that feels like a huge violation. So anger as the first response is completely appropriate.
Yep.
And that is righteous anger. The next question is, what now? Do we just stay there and just stay mad and burn ourselves out? Or do we channel that into an embodied way of being in the world and say, I am going to speak up for my boundaries and for other people's boundaries in whatever way that I can, from a calmer place where we're in that window of tolerance and we're not going to crash and burn because of it.
Right, because we want to be able to recognize, like, again, people can start with, oh, we're gonna, like, I'm so angry, so now we're gonna revolt and have all of these huge activism things, and then we're all gonna be burnt out, and, like, it's gonna be dormant for a long time. Versus, we need a steady flow. We need a steady level of activism that we can consistently be supportive of each other and build up these resistances to the oppression that has set in, because we've had these waves of being angry to the point of burnout and then having to step back and then being angry again. And it's just like, if there's a level of consistency from, and this is the thing about community too, is like, there can be people that are angry to the point of burnout, but then if they have community members that are not burnt out, they can, like, take the reins for a little bit.
Right.
And then those people who are burnt out can do some self-care, come back into the fold, and continue the journey of healing and activism together. And that's why community is so important. Like, we can't do this fight alone.
Right. And the bottom line is, no matter who you are, you need to take care of yourself and your emotions, your mental health, your spiritual health, mm-hmm. and your physical health. And anger has so many ways it can be challenged. You know, if you want to take that anger and you want to go protest, that's a very physical act. You know, you're going to be standing. Is that something that your body can do? Are you a person that likes to express your anger through words, and you can write a letter to share with the world, or to share with politicians, or to share with policymakers, or whatever? Like, we're all going to use our anger in different ways, but the important part is for us to consider how we need to use it in the way that is healthiest for us. How do we express what we need in the world when we feel the anger that our boundaries have been violated?
Yep, absolutely. Very, very important for us to keep in mind.
So stay angry if you need to, but like, be with it. Actually be mindful of it. See what it needs to do, what it wants to do next, that is coming from an aligned place within you, and not out of that just the automatic, the fear response. You know, ask yourself, am I centered? Is this anger coming from a heart-centered place, right? Is this anger coming from love? Because we love people so much and we don't want them to suffer, so we're angry that the suffering is being perpetuated, which is an act of compassion at that point to try and speak up against and work to get those rights back. Or is this anger coming from a place of fear, and I'm just going to try to burn everyone down around me in that fear response?
Yeah. And if you are in a fear response where you're starting to feel hopeless on what you can do for the community, start with yourself. Start with, how can you feel physically safer? How can you feel emotionally safer, spiritually safer? What sort of things you can do to set up in your space so that you can have safety consistently in your life.
And if you can't have safety consistently in your life, even just a moment of an anchor to emotionally anchor into, to tune into your present and work on, again, getting into your window of tolerance so you can take action.
And that anchor can be as simple as a specific, like a sticker you might have on your wall, or a stone or crystal that you have that you can hold and it's heavy, or a certain temperature, or you can, if temperature's a thing, you can, if you have ice cubes in your freezer, you can grab an ice cube, and that can help kind of shock you back into a more grounded position. So if you've never thought about an anchor before, that can be something that you explore this week or your whole life. Like, it'll change. It'll change all the time. Like, one time I had an anchor that was a stone for a long time, and then it changed to be like a stuffed animal, which are two completely different textures.
I have a glass pumpkin on my desk. That's one of my anchors.
Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful.
But yeah, an anchor is literally just something that tunes you back into awareness of yourself, of taking a breath, of pausing, of really assessing your situation instead of being fully in the emotional parts, and coming back to center. That's the intention. And it's a practice. You have to practice using an anchor to remind you of that thing. But
yeah, and you have to practice the awareness of recognizing your anger too. And asking yourself, like, where you want to take it. So all of these things that we mention, you might be like, I'm really bad at this. Yeah, you probably will be. And that's fine, because it's not something that you were taught when you were younger. So now that you're aware of it, it's something that you can consistently build upon throughout your life. And you'll have ups and downs. You'll have moments where you feel really good doing this, and then other times you feel like you're really struggling doing, like honing in and witnessing your anger or witnessing other emotions. And that is okay. And that's what being human is all about. As much as we hate, literally every time in therapy, my therapist is like, it's because you're human. And I'm like, shut up.
I don't want to be anymore.
No. But yeah, so just be gentle on yourself. I have to tell myself that every day. Because, just listening to this podcast and becoming more aware of this stuff is progress in your work of becoming more aware.
Absolutely. And if you are a person who wants to be a part of these conversations, and you want to be a part of a community that's not pain dumping, that's not staying in a negative energetic all the time, and you want to talk about practical strategies, you want to talk about self-care and positive mental health, We would love for you to join us on our Discord channel, and the easiest way to find that is by going to that livinglunas.com. So that's Luna with an S at the end, and there's literally a button smack dab in the middle of the page because the page is under construction. But there's a big old button that says join our Discord, and these are the kinds of things that we want to have conversations about so that people know that there's an option other than just being down in the dumps all the time.
Yep. And all these links will be in the podcast notes. So if you're like scribbling it down and don't feel like reversing, like rewinding this, just go to the podcast notes and you will see those links for yourself.
And we hope to chat with you.
Yeah. Bye. Heck.
Heckin' chat.
Heckin' chat.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.